Thank you very much, Cathaoirleach, and I'd like to thank all the senators for their contribution to this very important debate. As I said, I very much welcome the publication of the Public Service Pay Commission, and the Commission has provided an independent assessment of recruitment and retention issues, and the report has been accepted by Government last week. And let me say, all members of Government accepted the report last week, which recommends a range of measures to improve recruitment and retention to the Permanent Defence Forces. I will try and cover as many as the points as possible. I try to take a note of them all. But I know Senator Éireann spoke about allowances and everything like that. I've always said that allowances form part of the pay of members of the Defence Forces. He was in government himself for 5 years. He had an opportunity to change that, and it wasn't done. I think it's important that we did increase the allowances. It's something that people have highlighted to me over the last number of years with the restoration of allowances, and I'm delighted that they were addressed in the Public Service Pay Commission. Our Senator Crockwell spoke about this only equates to something like €96, whatever the story, or 96 cents. Well, Senator Crockwell, let me say to you, you should go back to school. That's all I'll say to you. Or else you should get a calculator out. Because, let me, Senator Crockwell, I didn't interrupt you. I'd ask you for a little bit of manner just to listen to me, because I listen to you, okay?
Well, no, I listen to you, but don't, please, start telling me to go back to school.
So, if I actually take your mathematics, what you're saying costs €3 million. If you look at the package of measures, it's €10 million. So there's €7 million left over, right, on the Public Service Pay Commission. And that goes into increases in allowances. There's 10% on MSA, which shall have increases of between €602 and €675, including right up the colonel rank. Then there will be the restoration of allowances previously cut under the Haddington Road Agreement, which you have jumped up and down in this House over the last number of years to me. The security duty allowance, the patrol duty allowance, the Army Ranger Wing, bomb disposal, 24-hour duty, weekend duty. You never mentioned one of those in your contribution there. Not one of them. So I must have done something right when you haven't complained about them, because we have restored them. Because that is part of the other €7 million that you must have forgotten about when you said that there was only a €3 million package. So it's a €10 million package. And also, in recognition of peacekeeping. And let me say, yes, the UN provides a contribution. Let me say the word contribution towards our costs. But the level of the contribution does not cover all overseas allowances payable to personnel. And it is the state that covers the remainder of the overseas allowance. And I'm absolutely delighted that the overseas allowance has increased. And we as a government increased it. With the recommendations of the Public Service Pay Commission, and we accepted that. I'm actually disappointed that you wouldn't recognise that. There's a huge increase there as well. But I know, look, there's no votes in positive publicity. You have to go on the negative. I understand that. I understand that. Look, I understand that.
I don't look for votes.
I understand that you want to go on the negative. And that's, look, when I was in that position myself, I've done the very same. I've done the very same when I was in that position myself.
You're a decent guy, you know.
But you should say, Senator Negative Crockwell. That's what you should call yourself. But anyway, also in that you spoke about the Naval Service. Absolutely, I have stated on numerous occasions that we have challenges in the Naval Service. And there is increases for the Naval Service in this as well. There's a huge amount of technical expertise in the Naval Service that under this booklet here, the Independent Pay Commission, we will be looking at tech pay. And that is, if you actually are not sure, I stated that in my speech at the Naval Service the other day, that this will be a priority for me and my department to make sure that tech pay for members of the Naval Service will be looked at immediately. And I want that to happen.
Good stuff.
Okay? The other thing is the restoration of the pilot service commitment. not mentioned by yourself again, unfortunately.
Only had
But
8
look,
minutes.
I'll get you a full. If you want a full brief on exactly what's in it, I'll give it to you.
But sure,
okay?
we had an hour together.
But the other thing is the review of tech pay. I've stated that, and also the review of pay structures within the Defence Forces. That's a matter of priority as well for members of the Defence Forces. And another thing that you jumped up and down here for years was the adjudications, separate to the recommendations in the Pay Commission. I'm pleased to announce that the following discussions that I and my officials had, I stated it on my opening speech, but I'll say it to you again just in case you weren't listening, okay? That with myself and Minister Donoghue and his officials, that we have decided to pay with effect the 1st of July increase under certain allowances determined in the course of adjudication findings. The Army Ranger Wing will increase by €50, which will bring up to €200 per week.
Are you backdating it to
€200 per week. Cooks with the relevant qualifications will go to Tech 2 pay, Tech 3 pay, which has an increase of €26.90, taking it up to €40.42 per week. An account holder, which they are not receiving that at the moment, Senator Crockwell, they will now receive €65.80 per week and will be paid to account holders currently not in receipt of this allowance. And recruits and apprentices will no longer be charged for rations and accommodation, and this will mean a saving to them individually of €43.63 per week for recruits and apprentices. And to answer your question, I have asked them to come in and to negotiate and sit with our officials in the department when we briefed them last week.
So you'll backdate those?
Let me say, oh yes, this is another one you had. Actually, this is the most interesting one. Senator Crockwell spoke about the Assistant Secretary, Mooney, who was with me, by the way, and you said, has he ever went to installation or like that? I understand that you met the gentleman himself last week. Yourself did. Yes, exactly, exactly. So I'm delighted that you acknowledge that you met him and you know him, and you spoke to him, and you spoke to him. I'm delighted now.
What about barracks?
Can I, without interruption,
You're drawing him on you, Minister, but yes, it's Minister without interruption.
I'm delighted if he had stated that in his opening remarks, but he actually almost said this is a black stranger that appears only at night.
No, come on.
But
you know
let me say, no, I'll be fair to the man. He has visited installations and he does interact, but his most important job is dealing with the rep associations, both PD4 and RACO, and he has on numerous occasions, including only last Thursday, when he had a full brief of the Public Service Pay Commission to both representative associations. So I have to ask you to acknowledge these things. When you're getting your information, make sure you get the right information.
You're enjoying this, aren't you?
So anyway, to many other senators, to Senator McFadden, just on the working family payment, and I know that you did speak to the Minister for Social Protection, Regina Doherty, today, and look, there are people on the working family payment for specific reasons, and depending on their family circumstances and what their own circumstances are, if there could be a recruit after 6 months, he could be 22 or 23 years of age in the Defence Forces, he could have 2 or 3 kids, or she could have 2 or 3 kids, and that is the reason why the working family payment is there. It's for all members of the private sector and the public sector. And I'm glad that you welcomed this as a start, and I'd be the first to say this is a start to the pathway of recovery for members of the Defence Forces. I think it's important that we recognise that, and it's an important step forward for this. This is something that I have been, both RACO and PD4 have made representations to me on numerous occasions about the restoration of allowances, and it's important to recognise that all allowances have been restored to pre-Haddington Road Agreement, and they will have the restoration of pre-FEMPI it's covered in the Public Service Stability Agreement, which will conclude in October 2020. To Senator Alice Mary Higgins, you raised a number of issues, ranges of issue matters some defence, but many relating to foreign policy. And maybe you could take them up with Minister Coveney as Minister for Foreign Affairs. But regarding Operation Sophia, the reason that Operation Sophia, the operation is not rescue migrants, is because the agreement could not be reached on where we could bring those rescued ashore. Ireland is participating in its efforts to resolve this issue, but it is something that is outside of our direct control, and efforts at European level will be central to resolving this matter. You spoke about our involvement in PESCO. I believe this is very important that members of the Irish Defence Forces participate in PESCO. We are in some of the many courses that are there, and this will assist in enhancing our capabilities. I think it's important also working with other nations when we go on peacekeeping duties, whatever the story is, that we're not isolated from not working with other countries. And it is so important that we work with other countries, let it be in PESCO, let it be in CSDP, or whatever it is. It is so important that we work alongside other countries. Regarding Ireland's position, I just, sorry, because there were some, I think we do work with other countries, but previously we worked through the UN. Regarding Ireland's position on neutrality, I constantly restate our policy position and ensure that it is reflected in European policy, which respects every everybody's country's position, and I will continue to do this. You spoke about the new Commission, Mrs. van der Leyen, which she has been recently appointed. I know her well. She's a former Defence Minister. But if there is to be a European army, that won't be a matter for the government. That will be a matter for the Irish people. And I think it is provided for in the Lisbon Treaty. And that I'm very clear on that. I've been constant on that. That is provided for within the protocols of the Lisbon Treaty. To some of the other senators that spoke, Senator Colin Burke, yes, this is a suite of measures under the Public Service Pay Agreement. It's a start, as I have stated. This is from an independent pay commission, but I would acknowledge also on top of that there was a €1.5 million increases in outstanding adjudications. Senator Ned O'Sullivan spoke and highlighted one of well, let me state it in your contribution. One of the reasons why Minister Donoghue prioritised the Defence Forces personnel to be looked at by the Independent Pay Commission were some of the reasons that you highlighted. I understand that your frustration took so long for the report to be compiled and published and that, but there was a huge job of work in this report. The same with the health area. The number one to be looked at by the Public Service Pay Commission was the area of health, and number two was the defence sector. And I'm delighted again, and in fairness, that you did acknowledge the positive inputs that are there for members of the Defence Forces, and absolutely we have a pathway to go. I'd be the first to acknowledge that, and I think this is a start to the road. And like you know, there's a huge amount of non-pay issues in the Pay Commission as well. The review of the pay structures within the Defence Forces, and this will pave the way for the next round of negotiations under the Public Service Stability Agreement, which concludes in 2020. But also there is pay rises under the Public Service Stability Agreement, which concludes in 2020, of between 6.4% and 7.2%. In September, Defence Forces personnel will again receive a pay increase of 1.75%, like all members of the public service. Senator Robbie Gallagher, I think it was, Ned O'Sullivan and Senator Robbie Gallagher spoke about a number of issues that I have already covered. I know you asked me to I think it was the ICTU issue that you asked me specifically to address. There was a review carried out under the CNA scheme the Conciliation Arbitration Scheme. Last year in 2018, I got the report towards the third or fourth quarter in 2018. Within that, there was a recommendation that my department officials would talk or get into consultation, or I won't say consultation, but talk to ICTU. My officials have already done that, along with Defence Forces senior management, and they are in conversation with ICTU specifically on that issue. I have spoken to the rep associations on this, and they have specifically spoken to me specifically on this issue as well. That's an ongoing back and forward between ICTU and my department officials. Let me state that before I know that the recommended increases and restoration of certain allowances builds upon the measures which are already provided for the Public Service Stability Agreement 2018 to 2020, and the focus on all of these measures are weighed in favour of those on lower pay. The increases due to date have been paid. Further increases are due, as stated, in the 1st of September 2019 and the 1st of January 2020, and the last one will be on the 1st of October 2020, when Government will negotiate with the trade unions a new Public Service Stability Agreement. By the end of the current Public Service Pay Agreement, the pay of all public servants, including members of the Defence Forces, earning under €70,000 per annum will be restored to free FEMPI levels. The restoration of the 5% reduction on allowances cut under FEMPI is also scheduled in that agreement, as I have stated. And revised measures relating to pay scales of new entrants who joined the Defence Forces since 2011 were also introduced with effect from the 1st of March this year. And from a combination of all of these measures, private 3-star on completion of 6 months basic training will earn €28,110 per annum, and that includes military service allowance. And this point on the pay scale, alone will have increased by 30% since the end of 2015, and this equates to an increase of €120.39 per week on the starting pay of MSA for a 3-star private. And I don't think anyone here could say that this is not a significant increase. This is just starting pay with MSA, and there are incremental adjustments on years of service and the opportunity for additional duty-based allowances also on top of that. And we will move quickly to implement the recommendation in the report. This report here is it's available on the department's website. It is the implementation and recommendations in the report. A high-level implementation plan has been approved, and work will commence immediately. I'm not sure if it was Senator Crockwell as well earlier said, sure, this will be left on the shelf. I can absolutely assure you and all senators that these recommendations in the Public Service Pay Commission, these recommendations will not sit on a shelf. There is a high-level implementation group, officials from my own department, DF personnel, senior management, also officials from the Department of Public Expenditure Reform, and it will report in the Committee F in the Department of Taoiseach, and the increases in allowances will be implemented following confirmation of acceptance by the Defence Forces Representative Association. And this report also makes recommendations which include progress on the review of tech pay, commence a review of pay structures in the permanent Defence Forces, consider incentivised long service agreements for certain officer and NCO ranks, review current retention initiatives, undertake a review of recruitment, and introduce a new approach to workforce planning in the Defence Forces. I think Alison Mary Higgins mentioned that. The high-level
Defence Fund also, and the issue of autonomous weapons.
The high-level matter for foreign affairs, the high-level implementation plan sets clear timelines and objectives aimed at implementing the recommendations in the report of the Public Service Pay Commission. And returning to Defence Forces full strength will take time. I have acknowledged that. We have a huge amount of challenges ahead. The implementation of the recommendations made under the Public Service Pay Commission is just a step in this process, and there is much to do. And the high-level implementation plan sets clear timelines and objectives aimed at implementing the recommendations in the report of the Public Service Pay Commission. Work has already commenced and will be actioned without any due delay. So again, Ceoiric, thank you very much for having me the opportunity to address all the issues.